You're on in 5, 4.
We should not talk and just do that for 50 minutes.
Yeah.
I'm going to completely ruin the total beauty of the patch, but I saw a lovely crossfade, and we should give a big shout out to the Thomann video team. Mr. Jervis giving me a great round of Welsh references and daft jokes, and just the kind of, thanks to the Thomann team. Lovely crossfading. Not the 90s conference centre star wipe that would...
no diamond wipe.
We've been told we can't have those. But yeah, shout outs to the Thomann team. Eli and Annie, the elusive and Annie.
Quite elusive.
How's it going?
Good, yeah.
Funnily, you've got some gigs out in Germany, right?
I do, yeah. One in Cologne. Seeing if I can set up a couple more. I have shows back on the West Coast of America, so it's kind of a tight schedule, but I'm hoping to be out in Germany a little more, and definitely going to be back here soon.
Yeah, cool. Sure. So we'll go back a little bit. I mean, your history with music, just a little bit of background before getting to modular, effectively.
I guess the first experience I had with music was I used to be a huge Zelda fan. I still am a huge Legend of Zelda fan. And I heard the theme song from Twilight Princess.
Right.
And immediately I was like, shit, that's a good song. That is an amazing song. Like I wanna play that on a piano or I want to be able to recreate that. So I went online, like was obsessive, like looking at tutorials. I couldn't read sheet music. I kind of figured it out and like spent like a good amount of time playing, and that was my first like true like music is really a part of me.
And was that on a piano or a keyboard?
Yeah, it was on a Yamaha, some really old, terrible Yamaha from a thrift store for like $5 that my parents picked up for me.
So kind of what followed, that was the kind of catalyst for music.
Yeah. After that, I continued to play piano a little bit. Was classically trained, hated it. I stopped playing piano for 2 years. And I was still really into music, and I was like, man, I really want to play synths. That's what I want to. I want to play crazy, weird laser sounds and make my own stuff. And actually, looking at the price tag on some synths, I was like, well, I can't really afford this. I'm an 8-year-old. So, my dad is super into guitar, so he got me a guitar. And I played guitar for about 5 years, kind of going back to piano a little bit.
So did the guitar world, did you find yourself going down the kind of pedal route and exploring sound that way, or was it just a completely different style of music and guitar was a different experience?
It was kind of a different experience of music. I got into a rock band after that, and then I started acquiring pedals. I had one of the, I think the Boss ME50.
Okay.
And I was really like, I really want to expand on this. Like, this is fantastic. But I'm seeing all these really fantastic boutique pedals that do this crazy stuff, and looking at my favorite guitarists. So I kind of started to acquire some. I think the MXR Blue Box was my favorite. I had a couple random delays from like, I think it was like Tom's Line is the cheap.
I don't know that one.
Yeah, it was like $50 pedals that were tiny. And then that's kind of what brought me into synthesis, and I really wanted to have the full control of having a sound that is totally created from scratch, and then adding all these effects and all these different layers and the ability to take a signal and route it to a different place, and then easily route it to a new place, and kind of continually explore that side of it.
So was it straight from guitar to modular, or were there,
it was
modern or older synths in between, or?
It was kind of a whole crapload of keyboards and synths, and
I think that people that relates.
Yeah, definitely. The Volca keys, I think, was the first synth I ever got.
I like the Volcas.
Yeah,
I still have a couple of Volcas.
Yeah, and they're really good to learn. If you don't know anything about synthesis, it's like the best. Yeah. It's the best way to kind of get into it. So I messed around with the Volca keys, and then was like itching for more. I was like, man, I have to go more into this. So I got the Minilog, and then the Mother 32 was that sweeping the filter. I had it. I like ran home, went downstairs, plugged in my headphones, turned up the drone, and just went and like sweeping the filter. I was like, man, that's what I was looking for.
Yeah, that's it. And
then I wound up with stuff like a Juno 6 for a little bit with broken voice keys.
Yeah, every fourth voice crackles.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think mine was like every 6th voice wouldn't play. So I'd be playing, I'd be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, silence, and then some.
I don't know if silence is better than the crackle at that point.
Yeah,
maybe it is.
Silence is. I kind of got used to it. Like I could anticipate it.
Yeah, so you could double tap a key, I guess, to get around it.
Exactly.
The crackle is maybe worse than that.
And I started using for pads because it's got that great hold, and then if you do the chorus and a little bit of the flutter, it's just that amazing. Kind of
the chorus and the slower vibrato, like you said, the flutter.
Right.
Those machines really come to life.
But modular was always in the back of my head. It just felt like a pipe dream, except when I realized that I'd spent the same amount on a small rack, as on keyboards.
Yeah.
So I was like, I sold everything, got a 42 HP case, and Sputnik, West Coast, was my first module with the Mother 32, and that's what got me into it.
Yeah, nice. Yeah. And then this will be familiar, I imagine, to people that have seen your videos. Always pressed, really lovely, really nicely set up shots. we were laughing that they should leave some cables over the cameras,
Right.
and it'll look more like one of my videos.
Yeah. Kind of
so-
the garden.
Yeah, the cable garden.
Yeah.
So let's kind of run down what you've got, where you've landed
Yeah.
on with this. I mean, first of all, before we get into module by module,
Mm-hmm.
how do you perform with it? What's the key part of interaction? Because we don't see you in your videos.
Mm-hmm. Right.
You have to leave things to just generate and
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
play, and it's very melodic. But I imagine live, you're a lot more hands-on.
Yeah. So her mod was a really, really key point in this because of a lot of it's because you can have multiple different sequences in the same project. And for my generative stuff, I can create 8 different generative sequences and then bounce between them.
Okay. So the her mod's really the brain.
Yeah, the
the
Hermod
whole
is,
thing.
is definitely the brain. There's a lot. I do a lot of the kind of drone, just the soft drone, like maybe 3 or 4 different notes with the fine tuning pitch, which is often extremely hard to hear.
Yeah,
live.
you need some good monitoring. for that.
Yeah, yeah. So I've had the no headphones, and then I like turn it up, and I'm starting to drift the pitch, and I'm like, oh shit, I can't hear anything. Hopefully it's gonna be about on key. I can't hear anything, and then it works out. But I just got the Zeo, which
Okay.
is I kind of wanted to add more of a interactive playing element. And so I didn't want a separate keyboard or a module that's going to take up the entire rack. So this was kind of a good...
So is that a case of wanting something to interact with the sequenced parts, or is it a case of wanting to add a fully kind of performed voice?
A kind of
on
performed
top of?
voice, yeah.
Okay.
So that it's... Because you get... I mean, sequencing is wonderful and it's amazing, but it is a little bit... It's to a grid. It's all on a clock. I put so much randomization in it, but it's still 2 o'clock, and it still has kind of that grid locked feeling. So I wanted to introduce something that I can play and physically touch and add the human kind of. It's not always going to be in key, or it might not always be on beat, but that's kind of what I was going for.
Okay.
Yeah, and then on a personal level, it's as a piano player and as somebody who's played in a band for many years. It's kind of it's nice to be able to play stuff physically.
Yeah, I feel like with that similar background, you end up in this place of you forget about that for a while,
Yeah.
and you go down the sequenced path entirely,
Right.
which is a fun place to be. It isn't
Yeah.
like you're not doing that.
Right.
And likewise, I love sequencing, but you do want some interaction, I feel, at some point, whether it's a ribbon or a touch play,
Right.
or even just a MIDI keyboard again,
Yeah.
or just some way of interacting.
Right.
To me, feels important. And it might not be picked, it might not be the musical information, it might be tonal interaction.
Right. Yeah.
But I feel like for me, I need some way of controlling the
Yeah,
thing.
right. Something that's malleable by your own interaction, and
Yeah.
and yeah, I think I playing by myself and playing in this format with the sequencing and being able to walk away from it and still have it playing and doing its own thing is amazing, and it was a very eye-opening kind of musical experience. But I do miss playing with other people and miss really interacting and having it all kind of in real time and as you go forward. So
Yeah.
it's kind of a nice balance. It adds a little bit more of that side to it.
Yeah. So let's run more specifically down some of the modules. So her mod is the brain,
Yep.
as we discussed. Do you find yourself, you said you can have multiple sequences saved, are you repatching across different channels, or are you just recalling different sequences?
Mostly recalling different sequences. I have patched. I'll leave, let's say, the first 4 for like keytones, and then the last 4 for modulation or something else. And it's kind of nice having. It's almost like a matrix. I can kind of have different mod points to different places, and then switching the sequences kind of shifts them around with a couple different patching.
Yeah.
But it's mostly just recalling different sequences and different note patterns.
So what are the main voices that are sequenced?
Yeah, so...
Are you aiming for a couple of voices at any given time? Or?
Yeah, usually, so I'll do the 2 rings. Rings was one of the first modules I bought. I think this is the same original one. So I do the 2 because I like having the kind of that really a lot of notes all at the same time. And with the 4 voice kind of
overlap.
Yeah, you get that really nice kind of cycling. Mangrove is a huge voice in mine. It's kind of the drone tone, bass. I've used it for kind of other experimental stuff with the Foreman controls.
Let's hear them. Let's hear those in isolation.
Yeah.
I'll turn the sound back up and we'll stop talking. If we could hear rings and then the mangrove separately, so people can hear how it comes together.
Yeah.
So what's really evident is that, well, in a case this size, I think just going out and performing with 6U is a task.
Yeah.
The voices themselves need to be somewhat complete in one module.
Yeah. Yeah.
Obviously, Rings is a full voice.
Right.
The Mangrove as a drone
Right.
is effectively a full voice. Was that hard? I mean, Rings was the first module, so not for that. But see, with the Mangrove, I'm not as familiar with it personally. Was that a hard thing to kind of find your voice of it and what resonated
It
with the
was,
rest?
yeah, definitely.
of the system?
I had a lot of different oscillators. I had the STO, I had the teleharmonic. I went through a ton of different oscillators till I found one that really worked for the drone. And the thing with the Mangrove is it doesn't have as full of a sound as the teleharmonic. Or the STO is a little different. It has a couple more waveforms, but it has the formant controls.
It sounds like it's locking onto harmonics as well as the formant shifts.
Yeah. Right, so you can play these steps.
Almost like steps.
Yeah, and it drops the pitch down, so you can do these really great, bring in a drone, and then suddenly it drops, and it kind of hits more than just the sweep, which is nice too.
Yeah.
And the tuning controls, which I use a lot, are really, I really like the throw on it. I like the size too, it's very small. I had it paired with Sisters, and used Sisters for a long time and never really got into it as much as I wanted to, and it took up a lot of space, so I kind of decided to try going without a filter, so I don't have a single filter in my rack right now, actually.
No, and as nice as these things are paired with filters, they don't need it.
Right.
It's not just a saw wave.
Right.
That's going to get boring.
Right.
On its own. So we've also got Platts. Is that the voice that you're playing live?
Yeah. So Platts is usually the voice I play live, just because it's the only free voice I have. It's and
is that in the kind of Rings like string mode?
Yeah, right
again?
now it is. I sometimes have it on the bell. What is it?
Like the modal synthesis mode, a bit contrast from that.
Right, and since this is also kind of a complete voice, it works great to do key sounds, and the chord mode is really great to do chords. You can kind of sequence out chords, and so it's a really, because it's so versatile and there's so many different sounds. It's really useful as a way. I mean, with these two modules, it becomes like a little keyboard synth.
Yeah, with the chord mode, because it's the stacked chord, it's like doing the held chord on a Juno thing. The pitch is just going to take the whole chord.
Yeah.
The inversions don't change to match a key, for example.
Right.
How do you find that works against the very melodic sequences?
Insanely difficult sometimes. Most of the
That's
time,
what I was expecting.
it doesn't actually work, and I'm like scratching my head like, oh shit, like this sounds terrible. So what often happens?
I imagine there's odd moments of beauty in it, though.
There are.
They may be hard to find, but
and it kind of goes in and out. And right, like you play some chords that are super dissonant, and then suddenly they'll lock with the melodic sequence, and it'll sound really good, and then it'll go back to dissonance.
So do you find yourself queuing things up? I mean, you've got the Rosie in the bottom right. Do you cue things up to try and tune this, or do you just?
I've actually never used the cue system in this. I've tried, but since most of my voices are coming through the stereo out, which doesn't go to the cue, I can't hear anything else, so I can't tune anything. I've done the 1 year off occasionally, which is it's kind of weird to me. And
it's a weird situation. I've done that playing with clicks and stuff live, and it's not.
It's a
you
little
don't feel
distracting.
like you're quite in the environment you want to be in. Exactly. It's strange.
And I come from playing live music in a band, so everything is very like in the moment. It's as you go, and I kind of like that about modular. Playing
it's not
live.
Thinking about that, it's not a responsive place to be.
Right, exactly.
You kind of feel, for me, when I've had to cue things, I feel like this is just going to do its thing. I have to ignore it.
Right.
And just look for a pitch reference or something that I'm trying to cue or tune, and that's not really where I want to be.
Right. Yeah, and there's something beautiful about you twist the knob a centimeter and the whole thing shifts and it starts going crazy, and it's just as surprising to me as somebody in the audience watching, and it's like, whoa, shit, that was intense.
Yeah, a willingness not to fail, because fail is a strong word, but a willingness to maybe have to search for something live, I think is interesting.
Right. And it's kind of, that's the part that I really enjoy about playing live with modular, is that it's a little scary, it's a little nerve-wracking. But it's exciting because you're like, man, I really don't know where this could go. Like it could. I have an idea.
There's a risk that keeps it fresh, I think.
Yeah, and I love risks. It's an exciting. It's like that's when things really happen. Yeah.
So can we hear a bit of the Platt's voice as well?
Yeah.
Can we try some chord stuff over rings? I'm really curious to hear it.
Chords over rings?
Yeah, like I said, it might be tricky to find,
right?
But I think that's this interesting.
Yeah, yeah. That tiny little movement, and it's suddenly like, oh, and now we're in a minor triad or something.
Yeah, I was just like, oh man, it's got this. This is perfect. And then like you said, there is that. Oh, there's something that maybe doesn't work.
Right. Yeah,
it's interesting. Let's keep playing that though. Musically, there's a lot of really interesting spaces that I know I wouldn't write if I was to sit and compose,
Right.
like from the off, if I was sequencing the chords,
Right.
or I find anything like that in modular that invites playing around with intervals and harmony and multiple voices, where you simply don't have the control.
Right,
I mean,
right.
you can figure out where the knob, no, that's a major chord, that's a
Right,
minor chord,
right.
but it's too fine a control, I
Yeah,
think, to be able to really definitely go like major on this pitch.
Right.
This pitch is now minor to fit the key.
Right.
This is a 7 chord, this is a
Right.
9, whatever
Yeah.
chords are in there. It's really interesting space to be, I think.
Yeah, yeah, and so I really enjoy that aspect, and it's also kind of a stressful aspect when you're
Oh,
playing
yeah,
a show
yeah.
because you're like, oh man, it's hard. I don't have that control, so I have to figure out how to gain some of it back, but also let go of a lot of that. But if Plaits by itself, I've kind of figured out the places that go together nicely in the harmonics. So if it's just Plaits and doing chords with just Plaits, it works out great.
Okay.
It's when you start adding. It's when I start adding other things, and I don't build from Plaits.
Yeah, that's the
yeah.
extra layer on top
Right.
that becomes
Right.
more risky or stressful or.
Yeah, so it's kind of hard to integrate into an already patched patch, but if
Yeah.
it's easier to build from the chords in Plaits, and then,
Yeah.
and then kind of have it grow from there.
So how are you mixing this down? We've got mangrove voice, 4 voices effectively, Plaits,
Yeah.
2 rings, mangrove. How's that coming together?
Yeah, so it's going. Let's see, rings is going into. It's going into clouds, which goes into morphogene, and then I'm sending the stereo out of morphogene into the stereo of.
The Rosie on the way out.
Which is the effects return send, but I've never used the effects send. I just use it as a stereo channel. And then mangrove and Plaits are going into the Meleco VCA, which is I'm using as a mixer, and that is finally into Rosie.
Oh, it's interesting. That it's been there isn't really like a central mixer, as
Right.
it were. You
Yeah.
form a stereo path from the 2 voices,
Yeah.
and then that just comes into a return because that's all you've got
Right.
on the Rosie.
Yeah. Yeah.
I really like that kind of thinking in modular that you can make, because my first thought was, some voices, but there's not like just a mixer.
Right.
Like the
and
obvious
that's-
choice of just a mixer module.
Right, and which is such a simple. You'd think is like a straightforward thing, but there's with modular there's so many complex ways to do simple things.
Yeah, and committing the clouds and morphogene to part of it as well, rather than saying, well, I want clouds to just be on the output of everything.
Right.
And I guess, how long did it take to really form kind of that aspect of it? What has to go through the effects, what doesn't?
Right.
Was it quite a simple process, or was it quite tricky
Yeah.
to fit
I think
the mangrove in that's dry effectively?
Right. It came very naturally, actually, because I was sending a lot of things through clouds, and I really liked how this became almost another voice.
Yeah.
Especially when you pitch it up, and you get these kind of sparkles and these other extra keys that it sounds almost like another voice. And
I
then
really like
morphogene
playing
especially.
I really like playing the blend like that.
Yeah.
That it's without all the added reverb and the feedback, it just becomes this extra
Right.
voice, as you say.
Right, and so since especially with morphogene now and clouds with the reverb, it's really thick and there's a lot of it. I actually like having mangrove be kind of dry.
Yeah.
It would be nice if there was a little bit of space on it, but it's not. I mean, if I'm recording, I'll generally add a little bit to it. I actually won't have in recording and for tracks. I don't use the reverb on clouds at all. I like it a lot, but it in my system, it introduces a lot of noise into the output that I can't really EQ out. And it's not as I really like having the control of a reverb, whether it's a plugin or a physical reverb.
So with Clouds and Morphogene, they both seem to occupy a space where, I don't know if this was your mindset doing it, and I guess this is the weird way of asking the question. Are you seeing them as ways of blending in high end? Because that's one of my favourite ways to use them. And I say that knowing the morph is up on the Morphogene. That occasionally slices are going to trail up the octaves, almost like a granular shimmer without the reverb aspect. And of course Clouds does that with if you put the pitch up as well. I really like using them as I'm blending in. I see it almost like a high shelf or a filter, just let the high end in, but it isn't. It's this repurposed granular version of the input.
Which is fantastic because, I mean, oftentimes my biggest problem is not having enough high end. If you look at a lot of the EQ in my tracks, it's like this crazy low end that you can't hear a lot of it, and then the high end kind of trails off. So it's a great way to introduce a balance without like just turning up EQ and it's the same. You're hearing the same thing, but it's just louder EQ. And rings, especially in harmonic mode, I think it produces a lot of bass, especially if it's on the lower end. So I think both Clouds, especially the morph, and especially when you have it in the reverse or the octave up, and it starts to do that cascade effect. And same with Clouds, it kind of brings a new side to rings and a new side to the voices, which it's like having almost another voice. Like I said before, it's kind of like a half voice. It's building off of the ones that are already there and kind of adding to them.
So you mentioned recording. Are you multi-tracking or are you just taking stereo 2-track out?
Stereo
minus
2-track out.
The reverb and things on Cloud?
I try to do as much as I can in the synth so that I'm doing as little as I am in the DAW, and a lot of the time it's just mastering and just leveling and. I
was going to say, do you find yourself tweaking EQ, little notches, just trying to nudge it into shape?
I definitely do the EQ sweep, trying to find the bad frequencies and then cutting them off. In modular, it's so hot and there's so many frequencies.
I feel like it's really important.
I
mean, I love just 2-track thing, but you're totally right, especially with things like rings and more complex modal voices. Saw wave through a filter, maybe you don't need to EQ that much. But like you said, just getting some of those notches out. And it opens up space as well in the frequency band. Did an interview with Devox, a video I can link or it'll be on the channel, and Paul was talking about how if you nudge out the kind of lower mid, upper bass region, the separation between the two areas actually feels bigger. It makes the bass feel fuller because you just kind of tip the thing that's leading into it. And I feel like that creates so much space.
It definitely.
I thought I could hear that. That's why I went that way in your videos. It's kind of like, this has just been not really messed with, but just been shaped.
Because there's, and I'm all for the no computer as much as you can, but there is something to be said for adding EQ, and I wish I had a real EQ, and it'd be great to have a vintage graphic EQ that's is a rack, but it's not practical. And modular is already impractical enough as it is. So I do like to add a little bit. A lot of it began in I wasn't gonna do any. I was just gonna master it so it's at the correct volume and dynamics and whatnot. But I had a huge noise problem, and so I was rolling off almost all of my high end. And then I had to figure out how to re-EQ to kind of get that back. I don't really use noise gates because it's sometimes work in modular, but oftentimes it sounds bad and it sounds over-compressed.
It's so easy to get that chatter when you're on the edge of the threshold of the gate. I'm not a massive noise gate fan.
So I would have no high end, and then I'd have to add in or EQ for days trying to figure out how to get some of it back, or just let go of the high end. But I think it is important to shape. I find it important to shape some of this and kind of give it the little nudge to have that extra little bit.
So before, I'd love for you to kind of play us out again at the end of the video, but just before we get to that, where do you see this going? Either musically in releases or performance or a bit on both?
A lot of I want to do a lot of more film scoring. I kind of been getting that this year, and modular is a really great way to do that. It's a very particular sound, so you kind of have to know what you're looking for, and that's something I've been struggling with in scoring is people not quite understanding what this is. But yeah, I do want to do a lot more performances and album releases. I'm kind of trying to shift my music a little bit and introduce new aspects to it. I've been doing a lot of more reel-to-reel and more sampling and adding guitar and piano over the modular. So kind of acoustic instruments with this really, really crazy space station looking instrument.
It's an interesting place to be, I think.
Yeah.
And again, more of the performance aspect added to the kind of machine-like sequences.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, play us out. Let's turn it back up and